Hello, everybody. Welcome to the HR Roundtable. I'm PJ Trudeau. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to be talking about AI in HR and what some of those use cases are. And I'm so excited to have the amazing individuals with us today who have been doing some really great things. Very informal session, so feel free to ask any questions that you might have. Right now, I'm going to turn it over to Rachel, who is here with us from is it Hilton or Hyatt?
Hi.
Hyatt. They have been doing some really great things in performance management. So I'm going to stop talking and turn it over to you guys. And she's got some great slides to talk us through what she's been doing.
Okay, hi everyone. Just give me a moment. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Okay, can we see this okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. So hi everyone. My name is Rachel Simpson. Over the summer I worked with Hyatt as an HR intern, working under Carly and also working a lot with Latani, who's on the call today as well. So over the summer, my project was to create an enterprise GPT that is just mainly to help leaders and people around Hyatt have better check-in conversations. So it was surrounded by four different conversations, which includes check-in conversations, developmental planning, goal-setting conversations, and performance coaching conversations. This is my manager, Carly, that I worked with over the summer. We were working in talent development. And this is also my first time working in HR, but not my first time at Hyatt. I previously worked at Hyatt back in 2023 doing their corporate internship with food and beverage over the summer. So I'm excited to be back again. Okay, so I'm going to get into why this GPT was built and also she's outside. Sorry about that. So I'm going to get into why it was built and the reason behind the GPT itself. So leaders told us that they needed help. A lot of leaders around Hyatt work in different divisions and different departments. And some people, like in food and beverage, something I experienced is everyone can't be behind their desk at all times or have their laptop in front of them. So having something like this and having a tool that was accessible and they were able to use frequently, and also just have it always in their back pocket was very important. Sorry, let me go back to my notes. So as I worked on performance management and leadership over the summer, I noticed that Hyatt definitely does have fantastic resources, which were actually used when creating the GPT. So all their frameworks and templates and using their people playbook was also very important when it came to building this GPT. Um, but the problem was accessibility, as I mentioned earlier. So yeah, that's it for why I built it. So the vision behind this particular project was I wanted to create something that felt like having a trusted coach in your back pocket at all times. So not just a search engine that's, typical like using Google. Um, and also it was really important to have sources that were internal to Hyatt, so that they can continue following their modules and also using a lot of their values, which was very important when it came to building the body of the instructions for the GPT. So the GPT really does ask thoughtful questions. It recognizes reflection before giving advice, which is really important because a lot of AI tools, they'll just go ahead and just generate a lot of random content. But this is set to the conversations that you wanted to have. So I actually learned a lot while building this project. AI is definitely a funny tool when it comes to using it, and it's also just a whole nother world when it comes to building it by yourself or building it with a group of people. So a huge thing that I learned is that leaders really value using tools like this. And Hyatt definitely invested in a lot of incredible sources like the playbooks and the templates that I mentioned earlier. But honestly, they're only valuable if the leaders can access them and they can actually apply them to the work that they do every day. But my biggest takeaway from this project overall was that better conversations create better outcomes. So whether it's a check-in conversation or a development planning discussion, the quality of the conversation directly impacts engagement, growth, and trust amongst employees. Something else that I really did want to note was adding guardrails in the instructions of the GPT. So I made sure that it's not allowed to assign ratings or recommend promotions or do compensation or even just replace HR in itself. But it really is here to coach, prepare, draft, and organize your thinking. Um, and that's it for that. So if you guys have any questions, I'm not sure if we are doing a Q&A, but I'm more than welcome to answer anything. And also left my contact information on the screen as well.
Absolutely. Rachel, thank you so much. So great to hear about what you're doing. So, can you give us any more information on kind of how this has been received? It sounds like from what you said, you guys have rolled this out, or kind of the stage. Has it been as it was rolled out, any challenges that you might have dealt with in adoption in getting people to utilize a system like this?
So I would say when it came to creating it in itself, when we first started, we were mainly using it so that, or mainly creating it so that it can go amongst a few different brands and different hotels. Because some people just have, different management, and also Hyatt doesn't own every Hyatt hotel, if that makes sense. So just making sure that some of the instructions and some of the sources were kind of broad in a way, because obviously the information that you have and you talk to the GPT about, it will be fed into like your own little hub when you start having those conversations with the coach itself. I would say a problem that I did run into when it came to creating it would definitely be having it remember old information. Because this project, a lot of little changes can happen very rapidly. So I would say probably just that. In terms of adoption, I'm not too sure about this. I know that this is kind of the first time that Hyatt is doing something like this, but maybe Latanya may know a little bit
Yeah,
more
I'll
about
be
it.
happy to jump in. So we are still in the test and learn phase. We haven't rolled it out globally. Our next pilot will be with our executive committee out of EME. And so we will test it with about 10 leaders there, ask them to utilize it, and then give us feedback. Prior to this one, we also had just a coach focused on mid-year check-ins, and we took that information that we learned, we surveyed our leaders who had an opportunity to use it, and then helped, to inform, this GPT as well and some of those things that we've learned. So there's a couple more questions in the chat. Rachel, there's a question that asks, how long did it take you to develop the GPT?
Sorry, I had trouble coming off the mute. So I actually worked as an intern over the summer. So I had about 5 weeks to create it. So it was definitely a lot of having feedback sessions, paying people for advice or asking for help editing the instructions. So yeah, about 5 weeks to create it total. So
And it wasn't, I mean, the actual creating a GPT doesn't take that long. It was the research, making sure we had all the right sources and tools. And as Rachel just shared, just, having the conversations and making sure we're on the same page. Jill, you make a confidential comment around confidentiality and security concerns. So this is just within our enterprise GPT. And as Rachel mentioned, for the owner of the GPT, they're the only ones who have access to it, unless they share it. Now, if they share it with someone, and so it then falls exactly just as we would have a physical file, right? Our leaders should only be sharing the information. Um, Based on who should have access, right? So their supervisor, if I want to share some feedback. The other thing is it's a practical coaching tool. It's not a decision maker, right? So we built that in those guardrails, and it's also grounded in Hyatt's philosophy and its resources. So we uploaded our mid-year check-in, so that is the tools and the resources that um, our leaders are referencing. So it's not just broadly any information that they're getting out. But as far as confidentiality, there are some notes that will say don't upload any personal information. Again, it should just be around how can I coach this colleague through a difficult conversation, as an example of a use case, or help me refine my individual development plan, those types of things.
What a great tool to have. Anyone else have any other questions?
I have a question. I'm not sure if it's
Go
just
ahead.
me and I'm confused, but what led you all to go the, I guess, custom GPT route instead of like an engine like Gemini or Claude to be integrated into your organization?
Well, we have enterprise OpenAI's Chat GPT. So that's who, from an enterprise perspective, we have the guardrails around confidentiality, around our information not being used for training tools. So when you're on other platforms, if it's not under an enterprise blanket, they can use your chats and information. So that's really the avenue that we went, and a GPT is just one of the tools, and we're still learning. And this was a tool that we started to practice with. I've actually talked about this tool as we're socializing, and someone else was like, "Oh, you should turn it into a skill." So I'm not too for sure about that. We'll see what that looks like. But just learning how to use the tools that are available within the enterprise program that's been made accessible for our colleagues. Great question. Thank you.
And there was another question in the chat, actually, two more questions that have come in. Do you plan to just roll this out to managers or to all employees?
Great question. So there is a cost per license. Based off of that, I think it'll probably be available per user. So I was sharing right as we were preparing for this call, every performance management initiative that we're having, we're looking at how can we infuse AI. Also understanding that we have two different audiences. Um, every leader may not necessarily have access to enterprise chat GPT or to Copilot. And so until we have full adoption, which I'm not too for sure that's going to, how long that's going to take. And then there's also personal reasons, right? Some people aren't necessarily interested in indulging into AI. However, this particular tool was designed specifically for our leaders, and not for our colleagues.
And Rachel, we had a question about what type level of experience did you have with AI coming into this internship?
Honestly, I had none. AI is definitely something that's still new, but also developing very fast. I can say I used it at my previous internship with the MBA, but they actually were using Copilot instead of ChatGPT. So this was all a learning experience in itself at one time. Just learning how to use ChatGPT itself, but also learning how to create a tool. But honestly, over the summer, working with Latanya and Dusty, but I mean, they're not on the call, but names that you guys don't know. But working with other people at Hyatt and other people on Carly's team, and then using like their knowledge and also the research part of it really helped me a lot. Because some of the words that I put in the instructions came directly from people that I spoke to. So no experience at all, but definitely a learning curve, but not too hard to learn, honestly.
That's fantastic to hear. Well, what a great way to be a fantastic example for all of us in that you don't have to have any prior AI skills, that it's all something that we can build. It's just understanding what that business case is you want to try to solve for. So that's fantastic. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you both taking the time to go through what you're doing and what you're going to be looking to roll out. And it'll certainly be interesting to hear probably in a year or so how it's moving forward, and I'm sure how you've had to adjust and change. Thank you very much. I'm now going to turn it over to Veronica, who is going to talk with us related to engagement.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're well today. Thank you for joining us. Yes, I am going to talk about the data that you have after you do your employee engagement surveys, and you have all that data. And some tools are, if you are large enough to use an advanced tool, they may have some AI already built in it to provide you with how you look at the data and analysis. But if you don't, then this is a prompt that will help you. So I'm going to share my screen to talk about that. So, if you're doing, so who am I? Sorry, let me back up a little bit. I'm Veronica Matthews. I am a former HR leader, but I turned into an executive coach and corporate trainer. And I work with leaders and helping leaders to lead so that they don't give employees PTSD. And in that regard, I work a lot with leaders around how they show up using emotional intelligence. And a lot of the organizations that I end up working with have employee engagement surveys that they give then the results to the leaders, and their leaders are like, yeah, now what? And so what that leads HR with is, how do I support the leaders with giving them this information back to them? And then how can they make it actionable? How can they actually move the needle with the results that they now have? So the challenge that many of us have is you do these employee engagement surveys, you have all this data, but you're not necessarily able to categorize it, and it is dumped into, I mean, you might have little pretty reports and graphs that you can share with them or that you create, but then what does that really mean? And so you have hundreds of responses. In many cases, you're not able necessarily to spot the red flags that may exist in individuals that are ready to walk out the door. You can't you have all this data, but it doesn't necessarily alert you to that unless your leaders are doing stay interviews where they're checking in with their people to kind of find out where they are, how they're feeling, and if they are a flight risk. And so sometimes you end up manually synthesizing the data. So the solution is an AI powered analysis. So you dump your information into a CSV file or an Excel spreadsheet, and then I'm going to put a form in the chat, not a form, but a document in the chat that kind of refreshes this information, and also includes a prompt. Now that prompt is modifiable. So whatever you want out of it, you just write over what already exists, and then you plot that prompt. I prefer Claude, but you can use any GPT that's available that you have access to. And then you also are able to modify the prompt so that it gives you what you're looking for from the report. So what is AI capable of analyzing? A little bit of everything. It can tell you themes. It can tell you trends. It can definitely spot those red flags. Are people burnt out? Are people on the verge of overwhelm? Are they not happy with a policy or practice? Are they not happy with their manager? And so it can tell you a lot of those things. It can also tell you the positive things, right? Because we are doing a lot of things well. It just that the unfortunate some of the challenges end up outweighing it for a lot of people. So we want to make sure that we're able to highlight the positives, able to see patterns, and also provide recommendations on what to do next. So step by step, you prepare the data. And again, it's either in a CSV file or an Excel spreadsheet. You want to, the next slide talks about how to prepare that. But then the second step is to copy the prompts. And everything about AI is the prompt mastery, right? So you might need to tweak the prompt a couple of times in order to get the data that you're looking for. But the basis or the shell of the prompt has already been created, and then you can modify it as you need it. And then voila, the output is the report. So when you're preparing your data, of course, you want to make sure that you anonymize it as much as possible, strip any company name information, strip any information that would identify the individual. Because sometimes I know in doing and reviewing 360 reports, right, somebody will say, oh, I had this situation and my manager said Rhonda, right? And it's like, no, take Rhonda's name out of it and make sure that the data is as clean as possible. You want to make sure that if you can delineate it in this form, you basically delineate it in whatever form you need. If you do have open-ended, it works most appropriately for those open-ended response questions. And so you take that open-ended data, you scrub it, you pop it into your excuse me, your spreadsheet. And again, the more data you have, the better. 50 plus is ideal. And you want to actually say what the question was and then what the answers are. And then once your report will then tell you what you asked it for. It will tell you I designed a prompt to provide you with an executive summary of what the whole report would look like, so that you can then, after you review it and modify it, you're able to present it to your leaders and actually share that information with them, and you've saved yourself 4 to 6 hours in trying to break everything down. It also has a methodology, key findings, recommendations, and an appendix. And so some examples of what you'll get from your report. It'll identify red flags, like of the individuals reported, 38% are experiencing burnout. Or it'll tell you that there are equity gaps in compensation. Again, this is based upon the responses to the open-ended data. And then it'll also identify any strengths that they identify for the organization. And let's see. Also, you're able to customize the analysis because you are in control. So the GPT is just a tool that you can use, but it operates on your command. So when you tell it what you want it not necessarily what you want it to identify, but you tell it what you want it to do, and then it does the analysis for you, and then you're able then to review it and make sure that it meets your needs. And this approach works because it saves you time. It can be objective, and because they don't know your employees, and you don't necessarily have to look at it and say, oh, well, they didn't like my HR program, right? And so it'll let you know what the responses are. It makes it comprehensive and also actionable. So I am not going to do a demo necessarily, but I will plop into chat that document that I mentioned that has the prompt included, and give you an opportunity to look at it and ask me any questions you may have.
Well, I think you did have a question, which you may be addressing it with the document, and it was about giving us some examples of prompts that you've used.
Yeah, so some of the prompts that I've used is so with prompting, you tell it everything that you want. And you tell it everything that you want in one fell swoop, and then it does it. So I've used prompts like, the give me themes, give me highlights, give me the red flags, let me know are any based upon the information presented, flight risks, and where are the challenges. Is there a particular department that is um, reporting information more strongly than another? And so it really depends upon the data that you have available. If it's delineated by department, maybe you want to do department by department separately, and that way it makes it more clear for the manager, and then you do an overall report that actually has everything together. So it really is up to you. Yeah, Lindsay said I asked my AI what prompts or examples of prompts are ideal, and so I've done that too. All right, and so I there's a hmm,
So thank you so
just a
much
second.
for dropping that in. And if you have any issues with dropping it in, you can certainly send it to me and I can send it out with the summary.
Okay,
If that's, I can definitely do that and I'll make sure that everybody receives a copy of it. Anyone have any other questions? This is a great way to look at doing this. And again, a lot of it is all about just asking AI and guiding it in the way that you need to, which I think a lot of times we forget that we can do that, as Lindsay said as well, just asking it, what are the better prompts? Um, any other questions that you might have for Veronica?
I have questions about so while you're going through it, does your company just give you as many tokens as you need, or like do they require that you do things a certain way, so or have limitations on tokens and all of that?
Very good question, because if you're iterating your prompts, you might use some tokens and it might use up quite a bit. But what I would say is if you start with the prompt that's available and then modify it maybe in uh, maybe edit the prompt in a GPT that you have access to, and then use the actual analysis with uploading the file and then the final prompt, then that might use less tokens.
And Veronica, can you explain about tokens?
Yeah, so I don't I'm a novice, but what I know is the tokens are how much your AI is going to think and write for you in their response. And people that know it a little better can correct me, but it's basically the your utilization of the thinking of the AI, and how much effort it's going to use. And some prompts take less effort and some prompts take more effort. And I know, like for Claude, Claude has a brand new Fable, and Fable thinks very hard. It does a lot of research and therefore uses a lot of tokens. But they also have other other GPTs that are models that don't use as many tokens. And again, a token is how much it's thinking and what data is it going to turn back to you.
So it's another way for them to quantify how much they're going to charge you for the response that you're getting back.
Yeah.
Always got to be a way to find out how they can do that. Thank you. Any other questions?
And if you do have questions on the file that I dropped into chat, I have my contact information, so you're more than welcome to reach out if you have questions.
Veronica, thank you so much for sharing. This is fantastic. We certainly appreciate it. I am going to now turn it over to Sandeep, who has a lot of different areas that she's going to talk with us about.
Thank you, PJ. Okay, can you see my screen with the blue? Okay, So, one of the things while I was talking to PJ about how best to support the group was to make sure that I talk about how I use it. So, like Veronica, I am a former CHRO and now I have an executive coaching practice. But these are things I use in my practice. And then I will end with a client use case where they're actually doing an org redesign based on AI. So, that will also give you some idea about the common conversation that's happening about how can we leverage AI. So this company that I'll talk about, they've stopped replacing people that have naturally either retired or attrition for any other cause. So, and I'm also building on our last conversation at the roundtable about there are so many AI solutions. So where do you start? And one of the things, actually 100% of the organizations that I'm aware of are choosing AI as if it's like a Microsoft versus Apple choice. You know, the ad that was like, oh, you're either an Apple person or you're a Microsoft person. But I think that is not the right way to look at AI. A better analogy would be to look at the Microsoft suite. So if you think about you have data to analyze, you will obviously use Excel. It makes no sense to use Word for it. Or you want to create a PowerPoint slide, doesn't make sense to do it in Word. So if you use the same analogy, this is how I use it in my company. It really depends on what is the job to be done. So we had great examples where Veronica talked about Claude, because Claude is the best solution, in my opinion, when it comes to data analysis, whether it's quantitative or qualitative. So anytime you're looking at data related intel, so all the financial clients, they use Claude. I would say all the survey related or assessment related organizations, they're using Claude primarily. And here's the good news story. Every single one of these, just like any other software solution, has tiers that you can buy. So I am a very small organization. We're an organization of 3 people. So we don't qualify for the enterprise level. So what Latanya was saying is they have an enterprise chat GPT. So any enterprise solution or business solution usually allows you the governance, which is like contracting any organization, which means that your data is protected. You have much better guardrails that will ensure that there's no leakage of data outside, the boundaries of your organization. But if you don't, so for example, I don't have an enterprise model, I use the same techniques that Veronica talked about. It's stripping the data of any identifying information. I have also been advised to actually be extra cautious with Claude because Claude is so brilliant that what they have done, I have a separate computer that has no other files, is not attached to any of my systems, and I use Claude on it just because Claude can easily creep into all other files and access. So there is much greater risk associated with Claude usage. So ChatGPT, it's much better with language that is more human-centered. Of course, it still requires, finesse and giving it prompts that make it sound like you. But it's fantastic for employee communication, great with infographics, and I'll give you an example of what I have used it for. Or even when you're sharing summaries of, let's say, new policy release that went out or any change, it can do a fantastic job, if not the final product, at least a decent draft that you can work from. My work is very evidence-based, and I invite all of you to actually lean into research. So Elicit is a fabulous tool where you get most up-to-date research free of charge. And if anyone here is from a research background, you probably know how expensive a single journal article can be. So Elicit allows you, for example, if you were debating, we had recently on HR roundtable conversation about hybrid work. So you could do a search to say, give me a systematic review of the last 2 years of research on what type of industries actually are succeeding in implementing hybrid workplaces. What are the conditions that must be put in place, any other guardrails, and so on and so forth. So you actually are not just basing that on your network, you actually have evidence about what is working across the globe. So any of the things, especially like hybrid workplace, psychological safety, that are evolving very fast, this becomes a fantastic tool to actually ground yourself in what's best practice, what should guide where we lead our organization. Notebook LM, it is a Google product, comes free with any Google account. It is the most useful in terms of not having to worry pollution of you ask a question to any language model, it will pull from all over the internet. You can't necessarily control it. But with Notebook LM, it is fantastic because it only looks at what you give it. So some of the clients are, especially the smaller clients, they will put their employee handbook, policies, benefits documents, all their internal resources, and any question, any inquiry that is coming from a staff member or anything they're deciding for their leadership team, they can pull from that. Sometimes we don't even remember all the policies that should be considered. So what it does is it uses that repository, a container with your information to pull the answers to your questions. And Lovable is vibe coding. So basically, I can't imagine any one of us are coders here, but basically, it's like having a software engineer on command who you say, hey, can you develop a dashboard where new employees can actually walk through the onboarding steps? It can be interactive. I'm building my website using it. But it's really fantastic tool if you need fancy coding solutions or apps, internal or to be used external with clients, and that you can develop with Lovable. So I'm going to share, and I can walk you through each one of them in detail, but I think just to give you a glimpse. So because I work with executives, one of the tools, if an executive was taking on a new role with a different organization, it used to be a comprehensive process of walking them through how do you negotiate for the optimal compensation, which is not just based on the salary you have. I was able to automate the whole thing through Claude. So now they are saving significant time in terms of not just working with me, but they can work through the tool, entering, here's what they've offered me based on the job offer. And it breaks it down into every single aspect of what they need to negotiate. And then we just have a session to talk it through, as compared to me walking them through every step of the considerations they should make before they accept the offer. Just to show you, I actually asked Alyssa to do a systematic review of HR-based AI use cases across the world. And I think, Latanya, you will love this because few of the key pieces they said in terms of how do you start working with AI were the things that you've adopted at Hyatt. So when you talk about no decision making, the guardrails that you put in place, this is what best practice right now is saying that anything that, and this is where I'll tell you. So this document that came out of Elicit was like 22 pages, I believe. And imagine just reading this abstract would be, oh, give most people a headache. But here's the interesting part. I put that document in ChatGPT and I said, can you create an infographic that makes sure if somebody has no time to read the entire document, they still understand what are the key messages as a CHRO that they need to take away in considering applying AI in their workplace and having conversations with their senior leadership team. So basically, it first walks you through, hey, if you are deciding whether a certain job should be done by a human versus AI, here are the three things you need to consider. And if you're looking at tasks trusts like that come once in a blue moon, but more high volume, repeatable things. Decision stakes, don't give it high judgment-based tasks. Give it more low to moderate impact. So augment instead of replace human. So then it walks, I'm not going to walk you through the whole thing. I'm going to share the slides with PJ and she's going to share all of them with you. I think this is a fantastic tool to be able to really keep up with what's happening with AI, like the speed at which it's evolving. I am so involved and it's hard to stay on top of these things. Having resources that we can rely on, like Elicit, which actually is looking at scientific journals, and then having summarizing tools, because there's only so much time that all of us have, be able to pull that information and then apply it. This was an example I wanted to give you for Notebook. It's not the same case, but I pulled one of the old files I had on, I do a lot of work with female leaders, and most women leaders will know there's a big difference in terms of the leadership experience as a female leader, doesn't matter which industry you're in. So this was just an example to show you when you work in Notebook LM, which means that you only want it to rely on your sources. You can upload files that look like PDF, Word files, um, videos, websites, doesn't matter. But there's a limit to how many based on the account you're paying for. Once you've done that, you can decide, hey, I actually am just presenting a slide deck, or give me a summary. Or you can create a mind map, reports, infographic, all kinds of things. But my favorite feature is this. This is where you actually ask and talk to the data. So if you have 50 files, or let's say 50 policies, and you are deciding a certain situation with a certain employee who's asking for an exception, you can say, looking at all our policies, can you tell me, here is a request, what would be the perimeter of, the leeway we can provide this one employee? You're going to be the ultimate decision maker, but you're actually comprehensively borrowing from all your intellectual property. So this can that way be contained rather than any of the language models out there, because this will not pull from internet. This is only pulling for what you've given it. And the last thing, because I'm creating my website, I thought what would be relevant for internal HR, internet sites, or what have you. You can create dynamic, interactive systems. Like I could have never created any sort of like interactive thing. I'm not a coder. But on my website, I've actually put, if you have a senior leader with a certain amount of salary, certain number of skip level or direct reports, what could, based on research, are you possibly at risk in terms of the losses for productivity? So just that could be an example that you use in your onboarding. In one of the most common ways people have used this is, I work a lot in healthcare, and one of the hospital's systems, actually, they have over 10,000 people and a significant turnover issue. They updated all the information they have on the past turnover for the last 5 years. They can now predict which departments are at the highest risk for turnover. So that ability, you needed an organizational psychologist or a data analyst in the past. Now, once the system is set, there's enough confidence, at least like a 75% confidence, for you to be able to say, I have 50 departments. If HR has only so much capacity, which department needs help first? So that's a little bit of predictive analytic that you can use now because the systems allow you to create it. And the last one I wanted to share with you is an organization that has stopped, as I said, based on attrition, replacing people, because they're committed to be leaders in leveraging AI. So here are the 5 things that we're doing. We're still at stage 2. So the first part is they conducted an administrative review where they looked at, and this is only for executive and administrative assistants. They looked at what work is being done. This is not just job description. This is based on actual work that they do on a daily basis, and then documenting it in something called skill MD files. So most language models, especially Claude and ChatGPT, one of the ways you can move from this question-based, chat-based conversation to agent-based work. So agent is where you don't constantly have to talk to your AI to say what to do. Agent is, I tell you what needs to be done, and then it's your responsibility to pull the relevant data, source whatever needs to be done to complete the full task from A to Z. In order for it to do that, we need to create these files called skill files, or they're also called master documents. It's basically reorganizing the information that you have about, let's say, a job description into a way that AI can actually pull information. So basically, it's structured in a way that AI can actually use that data. Does that make sense? So it's reorganizing information in a way that it's readable by AI. So this is the stage where we are at. And what we're already finding is so much work that these admin assistants are doing are relational. And it's so hard to code it. So for example, if you ask your EA to book an appointment with your SHRM leader for your respective area, they may already have a connection with their EA. So that relationship cannot be translated into how that appointment gets booked. So the trust and the relationship that can't be captured. So what we're finding is it's not that easy to actually capture all the tacit pieces of the job. But what it's leading us to figure out is what are the pieces of the job that actually AI could do, and then the remaining will be the ones that the administrative assistants will do. But the plan is once this work is completed, we're actually going to run some experiments where these assistants are actually going to monitor the agents. And there is new research, it's called bot sitting, where basically it's like having an employee who is very new, inexperienced. You have to give them feedback. You constantly have to iterate. That's the work that we will do next. And based on that, eventually the decision will be made about whether the organization gets redesigned. But right now, the promise is that nobody's actually losing jobs. So yeah, those are some of the examples, and I hope that gave you some perspective about where to start. And I think somebody asked a question about tokens. It is fascinating how each one of these have a different way tokens work. So, for example, Elicit, which I use a lot, is the worst in terms of I have the highest paying program for it, but they not only limit how many tokens you can use in a month, they limit how many you can use in a week, how many you can use in a day. That can be, I'm somebody who works in a flow. It's hard. Now I have to plan ahead to know something new that I will have to research. I need to save some tokens for it. So I ran out of illicit tokens, and I have like calendar reminders. 14th is when my tokens refresh because I have paid twice because you can buy additional tokens. All of this is adding up a significant expense for the business. And that's for an N of three. Can you imagine with, having more people on the team, how much expense there is? And the last comment I'll make is what I have learned, and this is not just based on my clients, what I've learned in reading and talking to other people, very few organizations, we're talking less than 1%, actually have realized cost benefits or efficiencies. Right now, the greatest gains are in productivity, which is individual, and less from an enterprise level gains because the expenses adding up way greater as compared to the benefits that people are realizing. So I'll stop there and I welcome any questions. I'm going to stop sharing just so that I can look at where the chat is and if I've missed anything.
So Cynthia,
So Ali, sorry.
as long as you
Ali,
saw that question.
yes. So Ali has asked, when you're looking to see what you can automate or offload to AI, how do you effectively inventory the work itself? Um, and I think this is where the research shows us the three indicators that you're looking for. And I'm going to go back there. Give me just a second. So here, the three things you're looking at is based on the type. First of all the things that you actually do. How much of those things require your judgment, your knowledge that cannot be explicitly articulated in a skill file? So thinking back to your work that is tacit versus explicit. Then decision stakes. If something is such high stakes, you don't want to automate that, not until, it has been structured enough that you can trust that predictably the same outcome will come. And the relational complexity. The more people are involved, the more human judgment is involved, politics is involved. Those are the things that you don't want to start with. So, what do you start with? Um, think about if you had enough resources and you could have your own assistant, what would you hand off to them? And what like what SOPs, what directions you would provide. It's almost like treating, can AI be that assistant where I still provide feedback, guidance, and some work that does not require the highest level of judgment could be done by them. I think that would be a place I would say to start. Thank you, Latonia. The number one conversation people are having is So this is interesting. So the number one conversation that I've heard is how can we leverage AI? Because everybody is trying to do more with less and they're trying to save money. And this idea that senior leadership has that AI can save us so much money is dominating the conversation. And that's why the conversation they're having is about org design and therefore so redesign to reorganize. I am not seeing that that's actually truly happening. I'll give you an example of Uber. Uber declared they wanted to be the world leader in AI utilization, no limit on tokens, set a really aggressive budget for 2026. They ran out of that budget by March 31st of this year and still did not have actual savings. I can't remember the name of the leader, but PG, I'll send you a deck from this leader. Like he's considered the legend who has predicted, the future of AI. And he has shown that we're still in very early days. Somebody asked Rachel like about experience. Almost none of us actually have any experience. We're all learning. There are very few real experts of AI. We're just all experimenting. Um, but I will invite you to really look at that infographic to be able to. There's a section there which talks about when you're talking with your senior leaders, bringing awareness that the gap is profound right now. We're just in early stages of figuring things out. So there is readiness, governance. So if you have an enterprise model, that's huge. And the biggest gap that I mentioned to all of you, every organization I know is committing to one AI solution. And I really don't think that is the way to go. That's such a miss because one AI can't do everything. So I could be so wrong in this judgment, but I feel only time will tell because one AI is not the route to go. So the client I'm working with, so they have Copilot as part of their enterprise system. But because I am so wedded to Claude with some of their functionalities, what they have successfully done with their IT department is ask for an exception user case for one department only. So we will see how this works. I'll keep you apprised about how things evolve, but um, those are two things I would say are big.
Thank you. Absolutely fascinating. I appreciate the opportunity to join you all today. Thank you.
Thank you, Latonya. How does using AI resources differ or are more beneficial than those offered by HRMS platforms? I can see the customization, but I also see a lot of work. 100%. So the good news with HRMS or HRI systems that have their own inbuilt AI is that's a good news scenario because they've taken care of the governance and the confidentiality and the security. Technically, one of the ways you can test their AI systems, in the past, the biggest gap with HRIS systems that I've seen is in being able to run useful reports. With AI, you should not have to learn how to run a report. You should be able to just give a command to say, give me a report on all the exceptions that we made for new hires that were given more vacation than we assign to new hires. That should be the ease of AI, being able to pull that report for you. So you can try and test that out with them.
Sandeep, in the last few minutes we have, did you want to show us that client use case?
Sorry, that was the one that I talked about for
Oh,
org design.
perfect. Well, as you see in the comments, everybody has absolutely been able to take away so much from what you've been able to present today. Anyone have any other questions or comments? It is a lot to take in. There's no doubt about it. Sandeep, Veronica, Rachel, and Latanya, I can't thank you all enough for all that you've been able to show to us today and present on just the different ways you've been using it within your organizations, with the clients that you work with, and how there's just so many things that we are, as you said, Sandeep, we're aware of, but there's probably, it will continue changing. Just in what Corlin said in the chat, there are new things coming out all the time. She mentioned Chat Soul, which I hadn't heard of. There were several that you brought up that I hadn't heard of yet. So it's fantastic to hear and to see everything that we're doing, but I love that we have an opportunity to get together to talk about it and to be able to share. So thank you all for joining and for taking the time out of your day to learn more, but to also share and ask your great questions. Certainly, as always, feel free to continue sending questions. I'm happy to put the group to get the group together so we can talk about what everyone's doing. And as always, appreciate all of your support and sharing what you're doing with one another. I hope everybody has a great rest of the day. Make sure to take some time for yourselves and have a fantastic weekend. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, PJ.